Welcome to the Public Voice Salon. My name is John Bredin. We are an on-air dialogue on progressive dialogue, I must say progressive, on culture, politics, and the critical issues of our time. This is not a television show, in a sense, a regular show. I'm not a talk show host. Basically, I consider myself more of an educator, or I am an educator, having taught in public high schools and having taught English, also at the college level for 10 years in colleges like Rutgers and Montclair State and NJCU and Essex County College and in CUNY. Always opening up democratic spaces in my classrooms so my students could find their voices. With language, this is very much a project about language, about communication, about helping people to communicate better, including myself. As I stumble and fumble along here, I've never had any experience prior to this show, which is about 2 years old now. So little by little, I'm learning myself how to be an authentic being in person, on the air, on camera. I think we're living in a time in which many people put on fake personalities, perhaps myself included. You know, starting a show like this and thinking within the constructs of what television is like and what I've experienced in terms of a television show or a news show, kind of a Walter Cronkite type thing, you know. Now you look at television and you see people like Hannity and O'Reilly on the right, or Rachel Maddow on the left, and people like The Ed Show. And it always seems like people are yelling or screaming or talking in a very authoritative way, and that's not what this is about. This is about being a person, trying to create a new structure that's in the media where people can, you know, really become themselves and begin to think critically and develop critical consciousness about the problems in our world today, where also the arts are welcome, where we can talk about the novels and the poems and the paintings and the theater works that have given us meaning, that also at times help us think about the political problems too, in a world that might be. Always thinking about the world, right? Not just our narrow little part of the world, but the whole world itself. How can we move toward peace? How can we move toward love? This is a Sunday morning, and I was just watching the talk shows, Sunday morning talk shows, and I think a lot of my frustration, and one reason why I started the show, is because I was very upset with the way what's being said or not being said in the typical mainstream media. For example, nobody on this morning's talk show, any of the shows, said anything about world peace, about the possibility of having a world in which there's no more warfare. You know, I mean, this is probably the most important thing. We have nuclear weapons that are very threatening still. We have an ecological crisis that's getting out of hand. We have a lot of poverty. We have starvation. And none of these things are being talked about. You know, we have these sort of soundbite media where we're hearing about the Republicans say this and the Democrats say that, and in reality both the Democrats and Republicans are taking corporate campaign money, so they're sort of, you know, both representing a very narrow segment of the society, which the media also represents, you know, and nobody's thinking about the larger problems in the world. Well, here is the world. We have a world out there, and I want people to know, and me, by just holding this little world in my hands, we see that there are other places and other countries, and we have to act in respect towards the rest of the world. If we can figure out here in America how to be kinder and more caring and how to have a more loving society, maybe we can bring these ideas out to the world. Another reality is that we have a very low budget because we have very little money for this. Having taught myself as a professor for 10 years, as an adjunct professor, very low pay salary. I don't know if you're aware of this, but right now, it's been going on for about 20 years now, that colleges are hiring less and less full-time professors because they're trying to save money, because colleges now are being run like a business, right? When there used to be the administrators at the college used to be drawn from the ranks of the faculty. So you had actual scholars who were in the faculty making decisions. Now, the people who make decisions, who run the colleges, from the college president on down, they are business people, so they're thinking in a very narrow way on how to make money. And one thing they've figured out is that if they hire a lot of adjunct professors like myself, they could pay us a very low salary, no health benefits. So we have to basically run around and teach like 5 or 6 classes just to survive, which gives us very little time to think, to write, to do any kind of scholarly work, to make so that we would actually be more effective in the classroom. And I think it's up to now about 2/3 of all professors at American universities are actually adjuncts now. So when students are going off to college and expecting an education and paying more and more money, they're actually getting less of a possibility to have the kind of critical learning that they would you would hope. But I think what's happening across our society is we're facing a very deep educational crisis, in that people are being educated not to be better people, not to be thinkers, not to appreciate the humanities and the arts, and not to have a sense of history, but they're simply being educated to function as economic units. Okay, Erich Fromm, who I'm rereading a book by Erich Fromm called "Escape from Freedom." He talked about this as a society of automatons or robots. And very much when you walk around the public space here in Hoboken or in New York City, and when you see people going off to work in the morning with their iPods and dressed very nice on the outside, but on the inside I think there's an emptiness. And because people now are studying in a very narrow way, then when eventually they get jobs, there's this huge student loan debt that you have to pay off, so you have to get a job right away. And you don't have time to think about what's meaningful work to do, the kind of work that might be beneficial to society or that might be creative. So you have to get the first job at any corporation that will hire you. And many of those corporations are not doing very good things, to our planet. Let's go back to our planet here. The bottom line model in which most corporations are run today says that you have to increase profits at all cost. It doesn't matter if you harm the workers. It doesn't matter if you harm the planet. You just have to increase money at all costs. And I think this is a recipe for disaster. This is really a sick and an insane way to run a society. And if we don't do something about it soon, I think we're not going to have a planet left. So I'm hoping that this show and other shows like this will wake people up to think about a very different kind of society we might live in which human values are at the core. What is good for people? What will promote peace? What will promote better relationships? Okay? And I think this means we have to expand the arts, we have to expand real learning, we have to have less technocratic education. Certainly the sciences have to be promoted, but in a more theoretical way, in terms of not just surface level memorizing facts for tests, which is what you see happening in most of our educational system today. So this show is really essentially an intervention in the public space. After creating these interventions in classrooms, whether in colleges or in high schools, where I would put the chairs in a circle and the students, we would have authentic dialogue, and people who were shy would find their voices, and it was just exhilarating to see this process work, how critical consciousness unfolding. It's a very magical thing. Even for myself, I would find myself becoming more curious intellectually, learning how to express myself better, with others, becoming a better person. Essentially, the pedagogy that I espouse is not only to help people grow as readers, as writers, and as talkers and listeners, but to become better people. I think education, that's what education should be, essentially, to become better people. And so now we're facing a society in which there's a lot of alienation, in which people don't know their neighbors. A wonderful book by Robert Putnam called Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community, is a book that has had a big impact on me and in my teaching, and also on projects that I've created outside the classroom, such as at a bookstore in Hoboken where we're broadcasting from today. Back in 2002, I created an open dialogue where anybody was welcome, We put flyers up on poles. I wrote letters to the editor, and it was just basically a radically open discussion where people could talk of culture, they could talk of politics, they could tell personal stories. And the bookstore provided food. You know, we had hummus and baba ganoush. And the discussion started at 7 o'clock, and it was supposed to end at 9. But very often we would stay and people would talk until 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and then hang around the store till after midnight, because it's such a pleasure and such a joy to actually be in community today, living in a society that's devoid of community. We're devoid of community in our country now, real community. You know, Margaret Thatcher once said, "There is no such thing as community," she said. And Margaret Thatcher represents the kind of right-wing direction that we've sunk into this abyss, starting in 1980 with the election of Ronald Reagan, who would be too liberal, by the way, for these Republicans now, okay? He'd be way too far to the left. But Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, who was just, they made a film about her that won the Academy Award, which was like a whitewash, you know, what a great hero she was, you know. But she said also that there's no such thing as a community. Well, I'd like this television show to refute that notion and to say that there is a community, and we're going to go out there and we're going to find that community. And not only are we going to find it, we're going to help make it. We're going to help make it. Those of you who've been watching our show, the very first year, we broadcast in the same bookstore in Hoboken, okay? We had our open dialogues there where people would come in and talk about the important events and name problems and, you know, and just express their frustrations and what might be done. But it was such a joy to be in community, to see that we're not alone, you know, creating hope. And you would see the people, this bookstore is located right on the main street in Hoboken, Washington Street. So you would see the people walking back and forth outside. Some of them were curious and they would look in and say, "Hey, what's happening?" An actual community dialogue, wow. I think not enough conversations are happening in our neighborhoods. I think not enough neighbors know their other neighbors. I think we pass each other as strangers on the street, okay? And outside our own little coterie, our own little circle, right? That person online next to you at the grocery store who you noticed that you've seen a few times before, most people are not reaching out and saying hello. And this is something that Robert Putnam also talks about in Bowling Alone. I have a copy of the book right here. I'm gonna reach for it just to see, as you're looking at my bookshelf, that this is a show of ideas. We want to actually show substantive ideas. And this is also a personal project for me. So these are ideas that are important to me. You know, how wonderful that we have this opportunity to bring you this show, that I could take my own sense of frustration at the problems in our society, at what's not being addressed, and transform it into a work of art, some way to be creative and proactive. And so I say to you, watching at home now, sitting on the couch, you know, I'm sure you all have something inside. I think we're all artists. This is something my dad once taught me. My dad, who became a painter at the age of 48. My dad, you know, he was an actor as a young man. He was in a play with Warren Beatty at the age of 20. But he gave up the acting dream to be a married man, to be a stable married man. I give him a lot of credit for that in many ways. But the artistic side that was there in him eventually came out. He started painting when he was in his 40s. And before that, in his late 30s, he became an activist in the town, going to meetings. So he did become an actor, but it was on the stage of the city council meeting, you see, to be an activist, to be out there. And the word actor is actually a very important word in educational philosophy. It means to have a sense of agency. To have a sense of agency. What does agency mean? It's not just one of those academic words. It's an important word. It means to be an actor in your own life, to be able to move through the world, to not be stuck. I think so many of us feel like barnacles stuck to the side of the boat, you know. We're fixed like the fly in the amber. We get up in the morning, we go off to jobs that we don't like, you know, that we have very little meaning, and we come home and we don't, you know, you have a mortgage to pay, you get stuck in the grind, the bourgeois life, you know. Claudia and I saw Dustin Hoffman yesterday in The Graduate. They're screening The Graduate again in an art house theater in New York City. And it was the first time I actually really had an encounter with that movie, okay? This is a seminal film from the 1960s, which really resonated with the counterculture. And I think it actually helped to promote the counterculture in many ways. It was by Mike Nichols, and it was done in a very avant-garde fashion. And of course it had the music of Simon and Garfunkel. But the essential critique of that film was that bourgeois society had become corrupt and empty. And this is in the wealthy upper middle class, you know, the suburban with the backyard pool, and Dustin Hoffman comes back from graduation. He has no idea what he wants to study, and everybody's trying to push him into this and that, and he's confused. And how many of us have had that feeling, you know, that we don't know what to do with our lives? And now, especially today, the choices are narrowing of actually having a meaningful life and a career that matters in a creative world. And at this party where he feels totally alienated, Dustin Hoffman, you know, this horrible man comes up to him, you know, and he's this business guy in a suit, you know, and he says to him, "I got one word for you," he says, "plastics." You know, plastics. He wanted him to join a plastics making company. And in many ways, you know, the issues raised by that film are still very much relevant today, but we're increasingly becoming a nation of strangers. This is the book by Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone. And I just want to read a comment on the back. A couple of comments. One by Robert Reich says that this is a staggeringly thorough and trenchant account of the decline of civic life in America, which reads like a page-turning detective story. Bowling Alone is bound to be talked about and debated for years to come. William Julius Wilson at Harvard said, "Bowling Alone is a tour de force." Robert Putnam has amassed an impressive array of evidence for his original and powerful thesis on the decline of social capital and civic engagement in the past several decades. This thought-provoking book will stimulate huge academic and national public policy debates on the crisis of the American community. One of the things that Putnam says is that the mental health of a community is best gauged by how many people you can have a brief chat with on the sidewalk, right? In other words, how many acquaintances do you know in your neighborhood? And he says it's become less and less. Public space. Okay, so here we are outside, and in Hoboken at the waterfront in our attempt to try to create some community. So far it's been unsuccessful, and you know, it's hard to approach strangers. I want to say that, you know, it's, I guess, in a time too when people, how would you approach a stranger? You know, you don't want to be rejected, obviously, so you want to approach somebody who's approachable, you know, who has a look as if they might want to reach out to somebody. And I think part of what's happening in our society is that people are sort of moving away from each other, so they're not giving a welcoming look to another stranger. So I think we're facing that. And I'm also looking for some people to feature who look very genuinely interesting. You know, we want to have an interesting show. We don't want to have a boring show. So we're looking for characters or someone a little different or off, maybe somebody unique or idiosyncratic. And it seems that in our culture today we're becoming very conformist. Everybody looks like everybody else, you know. And I don't want to have just another generic person with an iPod who just graduated from a business school, you know, to come on the show. Why? What's the point of that? Unless, you know, that could be useful in some way in waking other people up. I don't know. I might have to reconsider it. But as you look around, we've shown you some images of beauty. You've seen some beautiful trees, and the cherry blossoms are in full bloom right now. And so we'll continue around, and we'll just, in a collage-like manner, we'll see what people we might encounter and what images we could show you of Hoboken in our attempt to create a community. Just when I was despairing about somebody wanting to be on the show, we encountered this interesting-looking young man walking by here, and he's agreed to say a few words about his thoughts on community and about Hoboken, and he's going to start by telling us who he is and what do you think about being on our show?
Hi,
Okay.
My name is Josh.
Okay.
I think it's great to be on a little impromptu show, just walking around. All of a sudden you're on possibly TV. Sounds good.
Okay.
That would be good if that would happen even more, if everyone's voices would be heard all over the place at all the time.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, I know you were saying that it has to do with trying to spread community, trying to get community to feel like one entity again, something that we can all feel each other and know that we're all in one place together. It's kind of sad sometimes when it seems like our society tends to be a little more isolated. It tends to be a little fearful of what's going on. That's what happens in the news these days. It's more about sad things, bad things that are happening. But when you just start walking around the street, when you let that guard down, you come across people like this and you have wonderful encounters. You experience that connection, that love, that community. And so the more that we can just do that, the more that we can just not be so fearful, but know that most of us have really good intentions for each other, and we can really enjoy life together.
And it's funny because you had that sort of a sense of approachability about you. As you know, been walking around trying to find people, but people sort of have their armor up and they walk by quickly and they don't. And you had that, like, okay, you know, it's cool, you know, you're a stranger, but you know, hi there.
Nice,
you know.
nice.
Tell us about yourself, a little bit about your background, and are you in college now, or what you've studied? Or?
No, graduated from Pratt Institute in Brooklyn about 6 years ago.
Okay.
Starting to feel old.
Okay. So you studied art?
I grew up, yeah, graphic design. I grew up not far from here, out in Bloomfield, New Jersey.
Okay.
I did art for a while, design. It still didn't feel quite true to like what I really wanted, and I'm still in that kind of experimental phase.
Okay.
I actually live on a boat right now. I'm the first mate. So
where is the boat docked?
Right behind us,
okay.
actually.
Oh, that's interesting. Show the boat, honey. Show the boat there. Oh, that's so fascinating. Wow.
And so now I'm doing a whole mishmash of different jobs. I do some design jobs. I do some construction handyman jobs.
Okay.
I be photographer's assistant and this and that. I'm just trying to explore all around. And in that, I have to be meeting people all the time, creating networks and just keeping contact with people. And you know, so people call up and say, "Hey, Josh, can you, you know, we need you on Wednesday for whatever." Sure, I got the flexibility. Let's do it.
So it sounds like you're leading a very interesting life. Tell us, what are your thoughts about the political situation in America today? Do you have any thoughts about that?
It's hard to get excited about anyone.
Okay. The Democrats.
So yeah, it just seems to be a game all along. I don't get this real sense of like real intelligent, wise, adult human beings that want to really take care of us. It seems more personally driven, and so unfortunately I feel a little apathetic to the whole thing. I do keep in touch with it a lot. Personally, might not be a surprise, I am like a Ron Paul fan. He's a little radical.
Yeah.
But he just seems like a wise, decent human being to me.
He's against the NDAA, which is good.
I'm not sure what that
The National Defense Authorization Act?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, we have to in general. I mean, never mind like just the community here in Hoboken. Of course, we should start here to make a community, but hey, this is 21st century, world community. We all got to get together. You know, I got friends from Iran, and we're great friends, and that's the way that we bridge this gap, is just by stop our prejudices, our prejudging of things. Just jump into the moment, and you'll you'll be surprised probably way more than you thought you would.
Josh, have you thought about running for politics? Very well-spoken young man.
We'll see. I don't know if I'd make it. I'd probably get the axe pretty soon. Who knows?
But have you ever been on a television show like this before?
I don't think so.
Okay, so something new has happened today. You woke up this morning and never thought you would be on the air.
Here we go. I just went to take the trash out, and now all of a sudden...
Oh my goodness. Miracles can happen, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right.
Keep the faith. Be hopeful. Thank you for being on our show, Josh.
No problem.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we're continuing our luck today, and we encountered a woman who was jogging by, and we asked her if she'd like to come on our show and say a little something about community, about what the importance is of having a sense of community here in Hoboken and in the world, and also something about the political situation, if she'd like to. Okay, first tell us who you are.
My name is Yamalis Diaz. I'm a psychologist and professor at the Child Study Center at NYU.
Oh, okay. Did you grow up in Hoboken?
I did not grow up in Hoboken. I grew up in South Jersey.
Okay.
So I'm a transplant.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. How long have you been in Hoboken?
Just since last May.
Okay. Do you feel a sense of community here? Or?
I do. I think you can sort of look around. I mean, there's so many people on this street right now. The nice weather does bring people out a little bit more. But I think in general, people do have a sense of community in this area.
And tell us a little bit about what you think about the problems in our world today. What do you think is the most important, pressing political problem?
Well, in all honesty, I think the most important political problem is lack of involvement. So, you know, certainly we could get into politicians and the pros and the cons of specific politicians, but I think people are starting to, you're either really involved or you're not, and I think the middle ground is a little less filled.
I love the fact that you're so open to being on a television show, and that even as we walk by, you know, there was this sense of being open to a stranger, and I find a lot of people today, there's a sense of people have the armor on, you know, and think about...
I think that's very true, and I think the closer you get to metropolitan areas, like New York City, people do tend to sort of, you know, be in their own environments, in their own worlds. But the nice thing is that when you're in near, like the suburbs of certain metropolitan areas, you do see more community orientation. So I think if we walked into any neighborhood in New York City, you'd get a little bit more of a sense of community. I'm guessing.
Tell us about your psychology, a little bit about your beliefs and how you translate that into practice. And
Sure. So actually a lot of my previous work has been focused on engaging low-income Latino and minority families into mental health treatment and increasing their access to care. So I specialize in children with behavior problems like ADHD, and we know that a lot of communities don't necessarily access care for those kinds of problems. So I've done a lot of research in that particular area.
what do you think about the connection between the society and how it feels to live in a society with a particular kind of politics, and that connection between this and mental illness. Do you think that living in a world that's so hyper-competitive, for example, in which people don't have spaces or free time to feel like a human being, do you think that also adds to the psychological trauma?
Definitely. I think in two ways. The first one is sort of the stigma within a specific community, so the beliefs and the ideas of different communities and different cultural groups, be it the Hoboken culture, be it, you know, the Latino culture, whatever we're talking about, the stigma of getting or not getting mental health and care. And I think you mentioned the sort of competitiveness. I also see that achievement-oriented populations, if there is, you know, a mental health problem, it seems like it's even worse, because worse meaning the stigma, because it feels like that's interfering with their ability to get ahead. But also I think the second problem is really the access. So certain communities have access to more resources, and others do not. And so I think that's a part of it as well.
So you think if our society was more fair and equitable, if the resources were distributed more fairly,
right,
and we had a shorter work week, where I'm a big advocate of a 25-hour work week, you know,
that sounds
so
nice.
people would actually have time to feel like human, and to read, and to be creative, and to get to know their neighbors.
Right, to connect. Exactly. No, I agree. I think the equitable distribution of resources is a huge problem in any arena, whether we're talking mental health care, whether we're talking, you know, access to just healthcare in general, any domain that you can think of. I think the distribution is certainly uneven, and we see that all the time, including the, you know, the sort of the 99% in the movement on Wall Street, and the representation of the 99% versus the 1% who do have access to most of the wealth. But I do think that is a huge problem, regardless what domain we're talking about.
So you've never been invited on the 1% media? The Hannity show hasn't invited you on?
Not invited me. I don't think that I've gotten my invitation to that, unfortunately. Or fortunately, however you look at it.
Such nourishing things to say, you know. I mean, it's really. Is this your first appearance on a television?
It is. Well,
this is something to celebrate.
Something to celebrate. I wish I had hair and makeup before, you know, but
that's fine.
At least I look like I've been working out, right?
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you again for being on our show. I love your spirit and your can-do. Let's just, you know, be spontaneous, and we need more people like you in this community.
Like you guys. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so after we were working here in Hoboken, we were able to talk with two young persons. It's true that to have the camera is a little scary, but when Joe was talking this morning about the community and the education, it reminded me when I was in my country, the kids over there, I don't want to diminish the education here, but we in high school, we have to read all the classes and we have to read the Russian literature too. And there are things that are very important that people normally don't really put too much attention to. As well, that community, this has to build the community because we were able to talk with another neighbors or talk with the other kids or talk with different people about different books or about different stuff that were affecting us. So that's a way that we can create community in our little towns or even in New York City. It's a big town. I was living there for 10 years. And I remember the first day when I arrived to the city was very kind of strange for me because people was pushing you. You couldn't really appreciate windows. You couldn't really appreciate to talk on the street because it was in a rush all the time. But it's good to have all this experience because then you know where are the deficiencies and how you can probably work to repair the problems. And working with the community, with the neighbors, is a good way that we can start fixing our problems. So I hope you're going to join our show and let's see if we can talk with someone else.
Okay, so I can't believe the great luck we're having today. This is amazing. Hoboken is such a friendly town. And we just met this woman walking her dog. She saw us. She saw Claudia, who was just speaking, and she smiled. She walked by, and she's curious about what's going on. So tell us who you are.
My name is Betsy Hamilton, and I moved to Hoboken in October 10.
Okay, of last year?
Yes.
Okay, so what do you think?
Last year was 11.
Oh, okay. So, you're a new transplant, and where were you before?
Manhattan.
Okay. Oh, a Manhattanite comes to the. Now, there's always this sort of stereotype. I know I have New York friends, and they're like, "Oh, if you're not in Manhattan, it's very Manhattan-centric, right?"
That's how I felt.
Before you felt that way.
I wouldn't go visit anybody anywhere.
Okay.
If they weren't in Manhattan, I didn't want to go.
Wow, wow. And now you have a different perspective.
Completely.
Okay.
I love it here. It's very, very friendly. And one of the things that's so good is that there's so many dog lovers.
Okay.
So when I first got here, I didn't know a soul.
Yes.
And somebody came up to me on the street and she said, "Is that a Cavalier King Charles?" And I said, "Yes." And she, is that one there? But anyway, she explained to me that there's a group in Hoboken and they get together once a month in the good weather.
Yes.
And all the dogs, a whole yard full of Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, laughing your head off. It's a great way to meet people.
So what do you feel about the importance of community in general, though, of having a sense of community in a neighborhood, of being able to say hello to people on the street?
I think it's just the most important thing in the world. But, of course, I had that in the city, too.
Where in the city were you?
The only place I could afford, which was the Upper East Side.
Okay.
People think it's not. People think that it's snotty. You can't find anything as cheap as you can on the Upper East Side.
Wow. Any thoughts about the politics in America and what needs to be done to get us back on track?
I've just pretty much lost hope at this point.
Wow.
I was so happy that Obama got elected, and I still love him. But I see him as being so powerless that he can't really put through any of his ideas.
Okay.
And then I don't know how sincere he was about some of his ideas, you know, when he was trying to get elected. Wow. And you have to do that. I understand you have to do that.
Now, I feel hopeful. You know why? Because you just articulated that. You shared that silence. You know, whatever small part, I think we need to say what's on our mind and the problems, and you just did that. You know, you put it out there into the airwaves, and you should be. I wish you could go on more media. Maybe this will be the start of your media tour. What do you think? We'll get you on the Hannity show.
I think not.
Okay, I hear you. Thank you for coming on our show.
Very welcome.
So here I am back in my Hoboken apartment, sitting underneath a print of a Van Gogh painting called Houses of Overs, which you can see from the beauty of this painting really shows you a kind of a scenic beauty where you see a community, there's people walking around, and you see the thatched roof and the blue sky. And it's an image of a kind of a small town, kind of a there's a sense of wonderment here. There's a sense of awe that you get when you look at this, and there's a kind of a cozy feeling, which I think also captures the beauty of Hoboken. In our intervention, as we walked around and we talked to people, as you noticed in between the encounters with people, I showed images of houses, beautiful houses from the 19th century, and very different than a kind of a generic prefab type of communities that are springing up across America, and these exurbs which are very alienated and houses all look alike. This is a 19th century brownstone stock town that has lots of trees, and the cherry trees are blooming, and so we wanted to get a lot of just images of that in terms of fast cuts. That's a technique which I got also from Jean-Luc Godard, in particular in his 1990s films, where he would show prolonged shots of nature and beauty, and we wanted to get that, capture that sense of the 1 square mile of Hoboken, where you have all this potentiality and possibility of human encounter, kind of slowed down a little bit from New York, where everything is very extremely hectic and fast-paced, and people passing each other by. And as you noticed in the beginning, I felt a sense of hopelessness that we would be able to do this. You know, nobody that we walked by in the beginning seemed very inviting to want to engage in a kind of impromptu conversation like that, but very quickly we found 3 people, you know, Joshua and Yamalis and Betsy, who were very excited to be on the air and to say some things, and to also talk about politics, to not be afraid to express their viewpoints and critique of what's happening in our culture today, in our political culture. And I think we need more of this if we're going to strengthen our democracy, if we're going to get the people's voices to be heard. So for those of you watching at home, I would urge you to just pick up a camera and get your own public access show if you like, or start to write letters to the editor, or you know, get involved politically. I belong to a political club called the Village Independent Democrats, and we had a meeting this past week where Carolyn Maloney, who's the congresswoman, spoke, and then after she spoke, there was a question and answer period so that anybody could voice, you know, could say something at that point. And I spoke, and I asked about what does she think can be done about the corporate control of politics that's smothering our democracy, and if she thinks that Citizens United, for example, could be repealed. And she spoke very passionately about that. She thinks that we need to get an amendment passed to repeal Citizens United, which basically gives corporations complete control of the political process. And if we're going to get back to a caring community where people actually have free time to engage each other, where people can have more conversations like we had today in the public space, if there's more time for friendship, for family, for for strangers, then I think we're going to have to really transform our politics as well as a political component to this. I'm hopeful that the Democrats will find their liberal vestiges that are remaining and expand upon them and grow them, or if not, I think we could create other parties, third parties, or the Green Party perhaps could be an option. But the other thing is just to reflect on the fact that we did this. We actually went out and we had a camera and we talked to strangers who had never been on television before, and now for them in their life and their experience, they can say that they were hopefully strengthened in their democratic soul, to think that they have things to say that really do matter. This has been a project which has been very important to me as an educator in classrooms, in colleges, and in public schools, to help my students to find their voices and to not be afraid to speak, and to so now I am extending this into the public space through this television show. And in addition to the television show, I have a new project called The Evolved Urbanite. And what the Evolved Urbanite is, it's a convergence of community, culture, and urban life. So that people who live, or actually, this could be done anywhere, including in rural and suburban areas, because everybody, I think, needs to be in community. But I think, in particular, people move to the cities, into urban areas, to live a kind of cosmopolitan life where they're engaging in cultural conversations and encounters with people. And nowadays, we seem to have lost that. We seem to be very fast-paced. We're a culture that's overworked, and people are working, 70-hour work weeks, and there's little time for interaction. So what I would like to do is create a space, a project, in which simply talking to each other is important, and to frame a space for conversation, for dialogue, and also to learn a little something, to learn about the arts, to learn about culture. We want to show people that we're human beings, that we're not, this is very much a makeshift, very much imperfect program with lots of rough edges, and that's good. But basically, the new project which I created, we had a very successful beginning 2 weeks ago in a bookstore in Hoboken, where 20 people showed up, and we had an artist who has a project to plant over 1 million fruit trees in the world, and she spoke about that. We had a sculptor who uses recycled metals in his organic sculptor, and he creates these wonderful creatures with that. We had a wonderful artist who draws renderings of buildings. They're very, very beautiful architectural-like buildings in Hoboken and Hudson County and in New York City. And we had other people speak, and we were in a dialogue, and it felt really good to feel connected, to not feel so lonely, to be with other people and to be finding our voices. And this project will go on and continue. In addition to the television show, and in addition to my writings, which I like to write letters to the editor of the paper, I also write essays and books. And so for me, I'm no longer teaching right now because the adjunct professor salary is just so low. Although I may decide to teach one class now and then just to get back in the classroom. I now have a real estate license, and I'm looking to support myself in a career as a real estate agent. But in addition to that, what's very important to me is to build community, to create a sense of caring spaces so that people can come together and find their voices, and again, and talk about culture, and to create a bohemian culture, to revive the art of dialogue, to bring back the salon, the old-fashioned salons that go back from ancient Egypt through 18th century France and the coffee houses there, and through through Greenwich Village in the Bohemian heyday, when you had Mabel Dodge had a salon there. Gertrude Stein in Paris, and we saw some of that in the film Midnight in Paris, that Woody Allen's latest film. So we invite you to be a part of this, to join us in this project, to get to know your neighbors, to break out of that silence, that prison that kind of keeps everybody disconnected from each other, because if that continues, you know, our democracy is going to say bye-bye, and it seems to be going bye-bye very quickly anyway, because both political parties are now being sponsored by the same corporations that run the media, and that would exclude somebody like me from having a mainstream show, for example, although maybe we could try to do something about that, not necessarily me, but other people who have something substantive to say, some real honesty and truth, could get their voices heard on a larger media format. But until that time, this is what we have. We have public access media. So I encourage you all to be active, to not give up hope, to read. Right now I'm reading Boswell's autobiography of Samuel Johnson, which was written around 1799, and it's just a fascinating book about Samuel Johnson, who read a lot and who spoke very well and who was very cultivated and who believed in this kind of a discourse, this kind of a, you know, a more erudite way of being in the world. And Boswell was very grateful and felt very lucky to be around Samuel Johnson and to write about him. And he wrote in a kind of a diary way, so it shows you the importance of writing in a journal and just keeping track of your thoughts and what matters to you. And one of the things I'm learning from this book is the importance of laziness. Yes, the importance of laziness. Samuel Johnson praises indolence, right? He praises indolence in a way that he has all this wonderful time that he could read, that he could write, that he could feel human. And I think in our culture today, we're getting so opposite that. It's the Puritan work ethic, which also comes out of the Reformation, when you have, you know, Martin Luther and Calvin, these kind of very stern people who, you know, felt that we have to be working all the time, you know, constantly working. This has become the American Puritan work ethic, which has infected our whole society, and we don't even have time to think anymore. We don't have time for democracy. I think democracy takes time, you know. So I think if we can get back to having more free time, that people can really be lazy in a constructive way, you know. Adorno wrote an essay one time about this called Free Time, where he critiqued the kind of mindless pleasures that people engage in, and they call that their free time. And whereas constructive free time would consist more of nurturing yourself intellectually by reading and by encountering artworks and in genuine dialogue. So we're trying to do that here with the show, and also in these Evolved Urbanite events that will gather in people's homes, in cafes, in galleries, and let's get back to community. Let's get back to being face-to-face. Let's get back to finding our voices. And this way, you know, we can record that with this show, okay? We can record these salons and these discussions and put them on the air so the young people can see what this is. So everybody can see what this is, you know, that there is such a thing as conversation, you know, that's not on Facebook, where people actually talk to each other and they talk about books and culture. So I'm getting the sign from Claudia that we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for watching us. And from the Public Voice Salon, on behalf of my wife Claudia, I wish you a happy night. Thanks.